And live. Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. So today I am here live with Nicholas Merrill from the Calyx Institute. The Calyx Institute is a nonprofit dedicated to educating people on how they can take back their privacy and providing them with the tools and resources to allow them to regain control over their devices. Calyx Institute was recently a recipient of a FUTO Legendary Grant. Legendary grants are grants of anywhere from 5 to 7 figures given no strings attached to organizations, projects, and people that are focused on giving freedom, privacy, control, and sovereignty back to users of their devices, which we believe that you're doing. So thank you very much for the work that you've been doing so far.
Much appreciated. Yeah, we really totally appreciate the support from FUTO. I think it's actually the biggest single grant that we've ever received, especially considering we have some other grants that have lots of deliverables. But this is one that's just saying, like, hey, keep doing what you're doing, which is the most rare and unicorn-like of grants. So, yeah, much thanks for making that introduction for us, Lewis.
Yeah, and I'll include links for anybody down below who are interested in this program. Now, I wanted to talk about the Calyx Institute and the Android open source project that you've been working on that you're probably most known for in 2022. But before I really got into that, I wanted to go over some of the background that you have. You received a national security letter asking for information on a client or ISP, from cell phone, tower data, email details, screen names, with an NDA attached that prevented you from saying anything public about this for 11 years. So you've been in this fight to try and retain people's privacy before most people even owned a smartphone or used touchscreens in their daily lives, much less before Android. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what that was like?
Sure. It's hard to tell that whole story because, as you noted, it lasted for 11 years. But the really short version of it is I ran one of the first internet service providers in New York City, and I had been doing that for around 10 years. September 11th happened. The Patriot Act was passed, and it kind of changed the legal landscape in terms of government demands for data. Um, what I mean by that is, we learn in school about the Bill of Rights, we learn about the First Amendment and freedom of speech, and we learn about the Fourth Amendment and the restrictions that it places on government searches and seizures. But under the Patriot Act, they expanded a power called national security letters. And national security letters basically allow the government, and when I say that, I mean like law enforcement mainly, to write their own warrants without going to court. The old system was, uh, the government says a crime has occurred or is likely to occur, and we need to seize these records in order to prevent it or investigate it after it's happened. The new paradigm after the Patriot Act was they could just print out their own warrant on a printer and run with it. I'm sitting at my office one day, and an FBI agent comes by and gives me this letter and says, give us these stacks of data. And my initial reaction, and as I'm reading the letter, it also says I can never tell anyone that they've approached me. So my first reaction was, well, where's the signature of the judge that signed off on this? And also, what about my lawyer? Can I tell my lawyer? And they wouldn't tell me that it was okay to talk to a lawyer. But anyone who's watched courtroom dramas knows that you can always talk to a lawyer, right? That's just a basic bedrock right that we have as Americans. So this put me in a quandary where I'm being asked to violate the rights of customers, and I felt that, and I still feel that service providers, ISPs, mobile phone companies, and these days, social media and all these types of services have a ton of personal information about people, and what that sort of comes with a certain degree of responsibility for protecting, or at least ethically examining each request for private data. And what ended up happening was, uh, I had my company had as a client the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is the New York branch of the ACLU, and I approached them with this letter in my hand and talked to them about whether this was a legal request or not, and they felt that it wasn't a legal request, and so we ended up filing a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the idea of national security letters in general. And courts repeatedly found that it was unconstitutional.
Now, the letter didn't say what the consequences were if you didn't do what they said. So what was it like breaking the non-disclosure in the letter to talk to an attorney about it when the letter didn't even tell you what the consequence was for breaking the NDA? Like, that must have been a sweat-inducing moment.
Yeah, it was not fun. And I was super concerned about it. It's kind of ancient history, and I'm thinking a lot of the people watching this may not have been politically conscious at that point, or they might have been really young, because 2001, 2004 is a long time ago. But at that time, the war on terror was the big thing, the war in Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, and President Bush at that time said that he could declare anybody to be an enemy combatant and just kind of take them away without a trial, without any evidence. And so that weighed heavily on my decision, because it went hand in hand with a bunch of other statements he had made at the time, like these very blanket statements: you're either with us or against us. And I remember wondering, like, does me standing up for my constitutional rights or the constitutional rights of my clients mean that I'm against the government, or does this put me in the category of against us? It was very concerning, but maybe part of what gave me the confidence to do this was that I had known the lawyer that I worked with for years, since even before he was a lawyer. So I kind of knew that he would hold what I was telling him in confidence. But then the next step was going to talk to the ACLU about it, or at first to the NYCLU and then to the national ACLU. And so pretty soon I had told 3 different lawyers about it. And that really started to concern me, that I had not violated that commandment not to tell anyone once, but 3 times.
Yeah, and just waiting for the moment at which you're just kind of like whisked away by men in suits and a black hat late at night for telling people this over the course of 11 years. I would not be able to live with the stress for that period of time. Now, before I get into a discussion of everything that you do, I just kind of wanted to reiterate the importance of privacy with this one recent piece of news that came up right before this interview, to the point where it almost wasn't in my list of questions, which is this. It was in the New York Times. A dad took photos of his naked toddler for the doctor. Google flagged him as a criminal. Now, this is a case where somebody was taking photos because his child had a legitimate medical concern. The doctor said, send us pictures. He took pictures. He sent them. And Google reported him to the police. Now, the police did a full investigation and found that there was no crime committed, yet he was still disconnected from all of these different services. From the article, it says, Google said reviewers had not detected a rash or redness in the area, because definitely the people at the programmers at Google are definitely medical experts. And they reviewed his account, and it turned up a picture from 6 months ago that they considered problematic, of a young child lying in bed with an unclothed woman who just so happened to be the boy's mother. And Mark did not remember this video and no longer had access to it, but he said it sounded like a private moment that he would have been inspired to capture, not realizing it would ever be viewed or judged by anyone else. I can imagine waking up one morning. It was a beautiful day with my wife and I wanted to record it. If only we had slept with pajamas on, this all could have been avoided. And many people will say, well, listen, why are you all privacy wingnuts? I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to hide. And the reality is that for me, what makes privacy important is something that I'm doing that is not wrong to me, my friends, my family, my loved ones, may be seen as wrong to somebody else who doesn't have context on that particular event. And you really don't know that something like this is wrong until you have the police knock on your door because you sent a photo to a doctor. So, what do you think when you read stories like this in the news, where Google is unwilling to reinstate somebody's account even after the police have cleared them, and the fact that they are going through all of your stuff in general to find things that could potentially be declared CSAM?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, because I'm a parent myself, and I could totally imagine being in a situation like this, especially during the pandemic when there was a lot of sort of telemedicine going on and remote doctor stuff. Uh, not everyone, especially during the early part of the pandemic, was able to easily go to a doctor's office, or was it advisable? So I could see how this is the sort of convergence of two different things that happened at the same time, all during the same period. Apple and Google started doing this kind of massive AI search of people's private data, and one of the roots of this problem in the first place is the idea that private data is being stored unencrypted in the cloud. And this goes right to like one of the central aspects of the Calyx Institute's mission, which is trying to develop and research different systems where service providers won't have access to the communications and private data of people. So, I mean, when I say that, I'm talking about end-to-end encryption. Um, the massive privacy invasion and the ways that it's fed, all people's data is fed into algorithms, uh, impacting people's lives that are totally automated is super scary. And it's scary when they're correct. Like if a woman is researching getting an abortion, or if you're a political dissident getting reported to a totalitarian government. Um, that's scary enough. Or if you're a recovering addict and you're looking for, you know, you're getting targeted with material trying to push you towards doing online gambling and stuff like that. There's a lot of weird information that is derived from people's browsing history and people's private information that that puts people in just a ton of danger. And so, when you have a situation like this where it's incorrect, it's even scarier. Like when people are being misidentified by facial recognition algorithms, and when like in New York City, for instance, I guess you're aware that the Easy Pass, the system that lets you drive through tolls, is also used to track cars comings and goings all throughout the city in places where they're not looking to collect a toll, but just because it's a tracking beacon that's in the cars. These types of systems, which go above and beyond the internet, like I said, it extends to things like Easy Pass or street cameras, speeding cameras. It's becoming basically like an all-pervasive system that can all be fed into one bucket that can then be used to sort of it goes down the road of like what you're seeing in China sometimes. So with the social scoring and stuff like that, it opens up the possibilities to abuse. And part of what we're working on at the Institute is trying to figure out ways that we can protect people from basically, what we're worried about is really is the dragnet aspect of it. There is no problem in my view with actual criminals being targeted for surveillance. That's always going to be a necessary thing, and law enforcement has a legitimate mission in trying to catch murderers, let's say, or human traffickers. But when everyone's being caught up in the dragnet, that's really where we have to say enough is enough.
Yeah, the idea should not be let's collect data on everyone to see what everybody is doing all the time in their private life so that we can pick out the criminals. The idea should be we have a reasonable suspicion to believe that you are a criminal, therefore we will pursue a warrant in a court of law to actually look into your data or search your house. It shouldn't be you search everybody by default, because that's how you wind up again, there are people out there that, there's one comment on the article from somebody saying, well, I remember one time my kids were playing in the sprinkler in the backyard or something, and one of the neighbors called the police to say that there was child sexual exploitation happening happening because of that, because the concept of the Karen neighbor, and the police just came by and laughed and drove away and said, stop bothering us. And the idea that that could potentially be the person at Google that saw that and decided, yeah, we're going to keep this account flagged just because we don't like it, even after the police cleared them, is terrifying to me. Now, you've said that. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just thinking about how, the combination of, like, not just Google, it's Ring cameras from Amazon, it's all these different systems all getting tied together. That the line between government collecting private information and private companies collecting this information becomes very blurred, because it all ends up in the hands of government regardless.
So you've said that ISPs, email providers, and online services store personal and revealing data. And if national security letters allow access to this data without asking a judge, where do you fit at Calyx Institute into helping solve this problem?
Basically, when I got involved in this lawsuit, I took on this challenge, and the path that we chose was litigation. So we went to court. At the same time, when the judge ruled that national security letters were unconstitutional, and this happened just a couple of months after we started in 2004, Congress started to look at the Patriot Act, because the Patriot Act was passed in extreme haste, and if you printed it out, it's like that fat. It's a huge stack of papers, and a lot of it went back and modified previously existing laws, and like removed restrictions and opened things up to much more abuse because they removed a lot of the oversight. We spent 7 years challenging the unconstitutional request for data, and ultimately won that in the respect that we didn't hand over the data. We were never forced to hand over any of the information. But
so you won.
Well, it's much more nuancial than that. Yes, won a couple times. The principle was about that data, but really winning to me would mean actually preventing the behavior from happening moving forward. And that unfortunately wasn't able to happen because the government withdrew the request for data. So once they withdrew the request for data, it meant that I no longer had standing to question whether it was constitutional for them to request that data from me. And unfortunately, not a lot of other companies or people were willing to do that. But as I was saying, so we took this litigation. We took this litigation approach, and during that time, Congress started to re-examine the Patriot Act and what they had passed, because they did it all in like one overnight voting session. They just passed this gigantic law, which was like thousands of pages, but without having time to properly read it. That started a whole legislative approach to like reform. They were like, does this make sense? Is this legal? Is this okay that we're doing things this way? Balancing that concern with the constitutionality and legality of it with the extreme fear that came from the war on terror and the fear of further terrorist attacks like September 11th. So there essentially are three things that you can do to deal with this. One is litigation, to try to challenge the laws. The second is the legislative approach. Unfortunately, during this entire time, they kept calling witnesses to testify and talk about what they had seen or what they knew, but I couldn't talk about it because of the gag order that we mentioned earlier, or as you called it, an NDA, but it was essentially a government gag order telling me I couldn't talk about it. So that meant I also couldn't testify or identify one of these letters. In fact, my whole lawsuit was done under the name of John Doe because I couldn't be identified. The third way that you can deal with this is from a technical point of view. And it made me realize, because I had a whole period of time, 7 or 8 years, when I couldn't talk about this at all. I couldn't tell anyone that I was involved in this. And that included my girlfriends at the time, or my mother and father, or my friends, or my work colleagues, no one. So I had a lot of time when I just was able to have an introspective, self-examining period of time. And when I say, it was 7 or 8 years. I thought about that the third way that you can deal with this is from a technological point of view. And I thought, why is it that the phone company and the internet and all these systems don't don't have built-in privacy protections inherent in them? Why is that not baked into them? So that's why we started the Calyx Institute, with the idea of trying to develop technology that has privacy protections baked in, and that's a concept known as privacy by design.
So one of the things that you're known for at Calyx Institute is Calyx Os, which I used. I've tried several times, and I did a quick video overview of it. And it's actually pretty cool. You know, it's based on Android, open source project, and a lot of one of the things that I was impressed with is that a lot of the things that you would expect to not work out of the box, based on me trying a lot of other Android open source projects like 3 or 5 years ago, surprisingly work. Like I can use Uber, I can use Grubhub, I can use Lyft. Can you talk a little bit about the development of Calyx OS and what your goals are with that?
Sure thing. Um, from like a 10,000 foot vantage point, the three goals for Calyx OS are to encrypt the content of communications as much as possible, and then to take countermeasures against metadata collection as much as possible, and also to take countermeasures against geolocation tracking as much as possible, because those, from my point of view, are the three major problems in privacy when it comes to mobile and internet communications. Um, when you realize that, but you can read a lot of opinion polls. Pew polling agency and lots of others have talked to people about their feelings about privacy online and their privacy with regards to mobile carriers. Um, pardon me. What you learn is that people want privacy really badly, but they aren't really willing to make huge sacrifices to get it. And from a developer's point of view, that is a really big challenge, because uh, it's often said that there's a trade-off between security and usability, using security as a stand-in for privacy, because they're kind of similar concepts. Um, what you really need to do, uh, is sort of, our philosophy is you kind of have to meet people where they are. So when you specifically mention things like being able to do Uber or Grubhub, or there's all this online dating apps. When you take the Android open source project and you strip away Google's proprietary layer, uh, you're left with sort of a gaping void where a lot of the services that people come to expect and rely on for the convenience of their mobile phone don't work. So we spent a ton of time trying to figure out how we could um, give people an automatic level of privacy while requiring the least amount of sacrifice possible from them. So it's sort of like trying to thread a needle, and walk a very fine line where uh, people get the most privacy increases that you can get without driving them crazy by having things that they expect to work not work.
Yeah, like many applications require this thing called Google Play services. Most people that use Android, they know Google Play in terms of the store, but they don't realize that there's Google Play services, which is just constantly digging in and collecting information on you. I'll leave a couple of links in the description below. You have several on your website as well, where they're and it goes over all the different ways that it's collecting information on you all the time. And it's not just the store that you get your apps from; it's also constantly providing information. You've added in a bunch of different pieces to try and fill in the gap between what Google offers and having nothing at all. So like on my, like my S10e with their Android, I see Google Maps when I load Uber. On Calyx, when I load Uber, I see Mapbox. It's different, but it works. You have organic maps as well, so people could find their way around without Google services. You have Nextcloud on there by default as a bundled app instead of Google Drive, which is going to, again, give me a higher level of security with my stuff. So you've struck a good balance between privacy and usability. Can you talk about the difficulties involved in building and balancing an operating system that respects your privacy while staying far away from mainstream solutions that take advantage of users? Because Google is so ingrained into our lives that what I found is that when you try to rip it out, it feels like you're losing a kidney.
Sure thing. Um, First and foremost, we're like an open source based organization. So all the work that we do is trying our best to make open source privacy solutions that then other people can build other tools on. So, part of our mission talks about making building blocks that service providers can use to build privacy by design into their services. And that's why we always try to use standards-based things like WebDAV for file storage in the cloud, and Nextcloud, and we try to leverage all the existing privacy ecosystem out there. Like Tor is very integrated into Calyx Os, and having Signal and WhatsApp be supported in the dialer for encrypted calling. These are different ways that we try to work within the existing community of people developing open source privacy software, and give people tools that they really can self-host in many cases, or if not, they can find different third-party service providers that they trust. It's really a matter of the way we view it. The open source community is all about having the ability to modify software, to examine the software, to have it be subject to public scrutiny, to have audits be conducted on the source code, to know exactly what it's doing. The whole hacker community is all about taking things apart so that you understand how they work, right? I mean, that's the ultimate origin of most of it. And we aren't against people using proprietary software. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of proprietary apps that you use, and I use some too. And sometimes those are the best solutions, and it's unavoidable. But we are always hoping to build open source equivalents, or at least things that are good enough for now, while retaining people's ability to use closed source stuff if that's really what they want to do. But the idea is that you have a good starting point that's all free software, that's as private as we can achieve now, and then we'll continue to iterate and try to improve on that every version that we release.
Now, a lot of this is provided by MicroG, which replaces Google Play services. So it allows me to use something that would otherwise require Google's proprietary layer, but without actually using it. And there's countless studies demonstrating just how often Google Play services is phoning home and reporting information on me that I don't want reported to people that I don't want to know these things. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to use MicroG versus, let's say, something like sandboxed Google Play services?
Sure. For us, using a project like MicroG is sort of like a no-brainer. It's open source. It's purpose-built to be more private. But to replace Google's proprietary version with one that's open source, and one that deliberately only passes as much information upstream as it needs to get the job done. So MicroG's approach began with examining the dozens of APIs that are built into Google Play and re-implementing them in order of how important they were or are. And the first thing that they did was implement push services. So that's how you get notifications when you get a Signal message, or that's how you get notified when there's a new Instagram post or something. Push notifications are what makes your phone work in real time. If you didn't have push notifications, you would have to actually open up Instagram to find out if there's new stuff going on. So if you don't get messages in a timely manner, then your phone is only of that much use to you. And so the second one that they implemented, as far as I know, is the location services API. But the problem with that, one of the problems with that, is that it's constantly sending your location back to Google, and then it's being stored. We replaced that with a plugin that instead uses Mozilla's free location services. And that has a much better privacy policy, and it's not an organization that's built on data mining. It's one with a much different mission. It's another nonprofit organization like our own, and it's we're not saying that this is like the end all be all perfect solution to this, but it's an incremental improvement, and it's sort of better than the status quo. So the third one that they did was the mapping API, and that's the one that you said you see when you go into Uber, and instead of using a third-party service called Mapbox, but that's all routed through one account that is connected to the Calyx Institute. So it's not them collecting a dossier on you, Lewis, and where you've gone. It's all through one setup for us. So yeah, it's basically like a no-brainer for us that we would try to work on the open source solutions to this rather than uh, improve the closed source Google version, because in the end we don't really know what the closed source software is doing.
What areas of development are the most challenging to you at this point in time, and what are the things that you would do if like if 50 people like FUTO came out and said, "Here's a bunch of money, go to town"?
Yeah. Well, there are a bunch of challenges. I mean, one thing that we're running into now is new versions of Android come out periodically every year or so. When we started this project, we were on Android 8, and then there was version 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, and now we're working on version 13. So every time that happens, we have to take all of the changes that we've made to the Android open source project, or all this stuff that we've built on top of it, and we have to port it to the new version. At the same time, we've been slowly increasing the number of phones that we support. So at first, when we started, we were only supporting a few Google Pixel phones because there's a number of reasons. One is that their hardware security is better than pretty much all other phones. But another reason is that the Pixels are the reference hardware that the Android open source project is built for. So it pretty much always just works. A new phone comes out, you compile it for that phone, and it just works.
You just answered the question that my audience was going to kill me if I didn't ask you, which is, what the fuck, man? With all this anti-Google stuff, you're using the device uses a Pixel by default, and that's a lot of these Android open source projects I see, not just yours, like Graphene and others, they start with the Pixel.
Right.
But
Well, so I would make a distinction there. I mean, we're not an anti-Google organization. Google is a mixed bag. Some parts of their business model I have very strong disagreements with. But other things that they do, such as keeping the Android open source project open source, enables us to do what we're doing now. And the same with all the other Android builds that are out there. So, it's not so black and white. Again, it's kind of a nuanced situation. And yeah, we start with those pixels, but there's a reason why we've been working on supporting other brands of phones, and it's not because of being anti-Google. It's actually because Google Pixels are only sold in around 12 countries in the world. They're mostly like Western European countries, the United States, Canada, maybe Japan. But there's 200 and something countries in the world, and we want, as part of our mission, we want the privacy software that we build to be available to the most number of people possible. So we've spent a lot of time since from 2018 through today trying to get our software to run on other phones that are not made by Google, because they're more available in different parts of the world. So we first supported the Xiaomi Mi A2 back in 2018, and we supported it for a bunch of years until it reached end of life from the manufacturer. But even today, we support the Fairphone 4, and we're also working on builds for OnePlus, 3 different models of it, the 8T, the 9, and the 9 Pro. And the reason for that is those phones are available globally. So it's super important to us on a number of levels, because, like I said, pixels aren't that widely distributed or available. So people in South America really can't get them. People in Africa can't get them. People in many parts of Asia can't get them. Therefore, we have to look for other manufacturers that we can port our software to. But unfortunately, it's a lot harder to get our software running on these other third-party phones. But it's so important to us to fulfill our mission that it's very worth the effort to us. If we had, 50 more donors like FUTO, we would hire more and more developers, and we would hire more user experience people to make sure that all the work that we're doing is super easy for people to use, and doesn't become a turnoff when it doesn't work 100% the same as stock Android.
Yeah, so this leads into my next question, which is what do you believe the greatest hurdle is standing between not just Calyx, but other Android open source forks that have similar ideals to you having greater adoption than they do now? Because if I were to spitball it, I can't imagine more than 1 or 5% of the Android marketplace are people that are using a ROM other than what came on their phone.
One thing that would be super amazing would be if we could ever find a partnership with a phone manufacturer, whether it would be Mitsubishi or Nokia or Xiaomi or OnePlus. If those phone makers would offer it as an option, like the same way when you order a Dell laptop, you can get it with Linux instead of Windows. It would
That
be
took a while.
Yeah, it took a really long time, and it took a lot of encouraging them and cajoling them and trying to pull them along. And then finally, they saw that there was a market for that, and it made sense to them. So I think one of the things that we need to do is, and based on my understanding of how these companies operate, you need to make a business case for them that it's worth their time and energy to support alternative software like that. So that's one way. If manufacturers would offer different options pre-installed on the phones, another way could be just developing easier and easier ways to install the software on the phones. So a lot of that has been a lot of progress has been made on that front by building web-based installers for flashing Android variants onto phones. So there's different ways, but that I think has limits to its scalability. Like I'm not sure that mainstream people are really going to ever want to get a phone and then reinstall the software on it, because it's just more than what they're willing to do.
Yeah, I think I think the biggest thing that I imagine is standing in the way of it is A, people don't know what it is, and B, anytime if somebody installs Uber on the device, they're in the middle of nowhere at 2 in the morning after a party, and it doesn't work. They're like, screw this, I'm never trying this again. And you've helped a lot of that by allowing the phone the way that you get it to have this compromise where you're protecting as much privacy as humanly possible while maintaining the basic usability that people are going to expect. Do you see your future threatened at all by the trend of phones coming on the market with locked bootloaders that are not unlockable by normal consumers? This is a problem that Aaron had. He wanted to try both Graphene, Calyx, and E on a phone. So he goes to the store and he asks if the bootloader is unlocked. The person at the counter didn't know the difference between it being unlocked by carrier and unlocked bootloader. So they sold him a phone with a locked bootloader, and he goes back and he's arguing with them that it's not unlocked because they don't even know whether or not what they're selling is an unlocked bootloader. So do you think that that's going to make it more difficult for all these different operating systems, or do you believe that devices like the Pixel will continue to allow people like you to unlock the bootloader into the future?
I think manufacturers not being I would say that's being not developer friendly. Not allowing someone to unlock a phone and install the different operating system is similar to like if you bought that Dell laptop we discussed 5 minutes ago and they wouldn't let you remove Windows and install Linux on it. It's kind of an anti-competitive thing, and it's really like it comes back to, I know, the right to repair stuff that you work on. Allowing people to control their devices is a basic right that should be supported by the phone makers. In the same way that in the States here, Congress passed all these laws that said that carriers would have to unlock, as far as carrier unlock, phones, so that they couldn't just stick you on AT&T and you can never leave with that phone. You'd have to get a new phone. Um, there have been sort of some legislative efforts like that one, but that law talks about carrier locking, not about bootloader unlocking, and it's two totally separate things. And most people aren't aware that you can unlock a phone and install a different operating system on it at all. So it's kind of hard to get to the point where Congress would pass a law to enforce that. I know, like in Europe, there have been a lot of more potentially heavy-handed efforts to try to do things like standardize the charging and data ports on devices. Like they're trying to standardize on USB-C and trying to force Apple to switch from like Thunderbolt ports on their phones to USB-C, because I think they're coming at it from a whole different point of view of just e-waste, and there being like hundreds of chargers sitting in a drawer in everyone's house, and how crazy that is. But potentially there could be government efforts to try to force manufacturers to allow people to put their own software on phones, which would then sort of deal with that problem. Because when it comes down to it, yeah, most of the big manufacturers' phones, we can't support them. They're either unlockable, or if they are unlockable, then they can't be relocked with a third-party signing key, which is sort of a prerequisite for the level of security that we support with Calyx OS.
Yeah, one of the primary points of the founder of FUTO's vision is that you should be able to program your own computer. You bought it, you own it, you should be able to write software for it. And like the idea with a normal desktop or laptop that I can't install an operating system of my choice, I don't think anybody would accept that. But it's weird that we readily accept it with phones that cost about as much as a computer. I mean, there are a lot of phones nowadays that cost $1,200. That's the cost of a fairly decent desktop or laptop computer, and you're not allowed to install the operating system of your choice on it, which is insane. Because the criticism that a lot of people had with the Apple ecosystem is, I can't install what I want on my device. I can't install I have to install software from the App Store, and then for a lot of Android devices to come along and say, well, you can't install the version of the Android that you want. It seems insane. It's particularly now that they're voiding the warranty if you unlock the bootloader. So doing so, if you have an issue with your hardware, if you have Ghost Touch on your screen and your volume button stops working, they could say, sorry, you installed a different operating system, as if that has anything to do with it. And, there are people in my chat saying they need movement on that in Congress, but I imagine anybody who watched any of the hearings, listening to House and Senate representatives speaking to Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook, or Jeff Bezos in summer of 2020, they were throwing rocks at their television, probably realize that's not happening anytime soon.
Well, that's why the work that you're doing with Right to Repair is so important, actually, because I think it goes beyond repairing, and it also just gets into your right to be able to work on devices and modify them and just use them in the way that you please once you've paid for them.
So what do you think would be the best way possible to get more people to know about and understand what your project is? Because I'm interested in increasing the size of the pie of all these Android open source projects, whether it's EOS, Calyx, Graphene, Lineage. The more people get away from Google Play services on their device, and the more they understand how these devices are abusing them, the better. Like, what do you think needs to happen for as many people as humanly possible to start using something like this? I use it as my daily driver on my phone now, and I have been free of the crack of stock Android for about a full 2 weeks now.
Mm-hmm. We're doing our best to spread the word. We're doing our best to make it easy. I think word of mouth is a very important thing. We've also been exploring partnerships with a couple of different phone makers who are like up and coming phone makers, not Nokia, not Motorola, but up and coming ones, and talking to them about whether we can become much more supported by their phones, and whether we can help them reach new audiences. But like I said, I think that one of the most important things is figuring out how to make a business case for the phone makers to support alternative operating systems and offer them as options when you buy the phones. It seems to me like you can write letters all you want and you can try to pass laws all you want, but sometimes what it comes down to is making it clear to those businesses that there's money there. So I think through doing that we could get more people to use alternative operating systems, and by doing that, more people would see that it's an option, because as you correctly noted, like, most people don't even know that this is a thing.
Yeah, most people aren't even aware of how much data their phone is collecting on them and sharing at any given time. And like, I think at the moment that somebody has to spend 20 minutes searching XDA developers to figure out how to unlock their bootloader to install something, you've immediately lost about 95% of the population at that point. So having devices that show up with the operating system is great. And like, I was able to get this by becoming a member of Calyx Institute, and I know that there are other vendors out there that will install a Android open source project ROMs of your choice on their different phones and ship it to you, so you don't have to do any configuration or messing around with ADB. Any closing remarks? Because I'm out of questions.
No, I just wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you today, and for asking me all these really interesting questions. And I also wanted to, again, thank you for your work on Right to Repair, because I think that's a really exciting movement, and I think it intertwines with the work that we're trying to do, and helping people gain control of their data, gain control of their devices. And again, I wanted to thank you for helping us get this grant, which is going to be put to use, furthering our mission.
Thank you very much for.
Yeah, and thank you guys for supporting our mission in the first place. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much and I hope you continue doing what you're doing. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Fuck, I forgot my catchphrase. I pulled a Steve. It's not supposed to be have a great day. It's that's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. Oh well. Next time. I'll edit that out. See y'all in the next video. Bye now.